I didn't know anything about nutrition at that point. You know, I'd come off of running roads and track and field and didn't really focus on nutrition at all.
Not even a little bit. I had no clue what I was doing to start. And it was like, I'll bring a couple gels with me. That didn't last long.
And I had this tiny little water bottle that I carried. I think it was probably like 6 ounces or something like that. Yeah, just really did not know what I was doing and paid the price later on.
So carbs per hour, I've had no problem hitting 100, over 100. I've experimented on the high end and done 140 an hour, and that's not bothered me. Bare minimum, 100 grams an hour will be the target. I'll be doing a lot of flow gels, so if I do a full flow gel and I let it last me 3 hours, I'll be perfect.
I mean, if you look at like my recent performance at Black Canyon 100K, I actually closed that race faster than anybody's ever closed that race. And I was running that last 40 kilometers faster than I was running the first 60 kilometers, which I can attribute that a lot to fueling and hydration and being on top of that.
I was probably hitting about 80 to 90 grams per hour, and I've really worked on that over the last year and achieved around 90 to 100 in most of my races.
I do like how with the 90-gram pouches, I know in my head that about 1 an hour is where I want to be at.
Working with Emily from Precision now, I've changed that quite a bit, where we now have a spreadsheet that's like really way more fine-tuned, really focused on carb intake and trying to get that kind of 90-gram benchmark per hour.
I usually aim for 90 grams of carbs per hour. Sometimes I'll do a little bit more, like later in a race or about halfway through. I might have a couple hours where there's an extra 30-gram gel. So there's a few hours at 120, but I'd say most hours are at 90 grams. I think something that has helped a lot was doing the sweat test and figuring out just how much sodium per liter per hour I need to be doing.
So the general idea for fluids is at least 800 milliliters an hour, depending on thirst. Obviously, when the race is cooler, I'm going to start out with probably 600 and then move to 800, and maybe it'll be a liter an hour if I'm being really hot. But that will just be supplemented by salt pills while I figure that out. And mainly drink by feel, but at least hit the benchmark of 800 milliliters.
I've been trying to get at least 500 mLs an hour, and then combining that with at least 500 milligrams of sodium.
Like Western States is probably the most I'll be drinking, which is going to be between a liter and a half an hour, I'd guess.
Yeah, I really try and hit about 500 mils per hour. If it's really hot, which likelihood is going to be at Western States, then that could be upwards to a liter. And I've just got to make sure that I really think I just want to drink to feel and make sure that I don't get too dehydrated out there.
So if it's a cold race, I do like half a liter of water per hour and then 500 milligrams sodium with the electrolyte capsules. And then if it's a hot race, like really hot, I'll do up to a liter an hour. Something like if it's really, really hot, sometimes a little bit more at aid stations, and then that's 1,000 milligrams of sodium per hour.
Yeah, so I've been tested. I've had sweat tests done a couple times now, and my numbers are 1,000 milligrams of sodium per liter of water. And so that's the numbers that I target or I aim for during a hot race.
My final Hail Mary was to figure out my cramping, because I would cramp like clockwork at 10 miles to go, 20 miles to go in a lot of my races. And I'm like, okay, I have to be getting enough salt. Maybe it's a muscle thing, so I did strength work. And then I was like, all right, I'm still cramping. Cramping a little bit later, but I'm still cramping. So I got a sweat test through Precision, and I found out that I was grossly missing my salt numbers, or my sodium numbers. And Black Canyon was the first time I nailed my nutrition and my salt intake, and I had no cramps and I had no issues with nutrition, and I got a golden ticket.
We've got the game plan all set in place, and as long as I'm actually taking on my flow gel, taking on my fluids, then I know that I'm actually hitting what I set out to hit.
I planned everything out, and then I was like, oh, here's my framework.
But using Western States as an example, I'll be using a vest at the beginning where I'll have a 500 milliliter soft flask in each side. And I'll be carrying electrolyte tablets in those soft flasks with some extra packets to refill at aid stations on the way so that I can fill that up with water, dump in some electrolytes, and keep going.
So I think you've got to have the right gear and also take into account temperatures. So from the start, it's actually going to be quite a bit cooler in the morning. Wearing a vest where you can access things really easily is probably going to be doable, and that's what I'll probably start with. And then as we go, the day's going to heat up. We're probably going to need less as the aid stations, the crude aid stations, come closer together, and that's when I'll revert to handhelds and using a waist belt.
I think if I could do every single race with a belt, I would be running every single race with a belt. But a race like UTMB has so much required gear that it forces you to use a pack. So most of those longer mountainous European races, you have to use a pack just to carry all the gear. Most things in the United States, I'll race with a belt, and I'll keep one bottle in the back, one bottle in my hand, and then the two front pockets will be gels and electrolytes.
I've got what I'm going to take in terms of carb electrolyte, and then if I feel thirsty between my crude aid stations, then I'm going to top up at the uncrude aid stations just with straight water. But to make sure that I am sticking with the appropriate sodium levels, I'm going to have some electrolyte capsules as well, just to make sure that I'm not getting too diluted if I have to take on more straight water.
I think a big focus for my training has been training with what I'll be using during races. And for me, that's precision and it's sport-specific nutrition.
I get it all from gels and liquid fueling. I find that I can't do chews very well while running because I tend to squirrel it and I just can't get it down. And so I haven't done too much salad. I have added like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or things like that just to sometimes get some protein in there and something to kind of make me feel more full. But I found I do better, I keep up better on my numbers if I go purely gels and liquid calories.
Just things that really I know actually will sit well in my stomach. I'm not going to go out and have a bean burrito in Western States. I'm not going to go and have probably a pizza or something like that. Maybe that would be nice in a longer race like UTMB where it's colder, but I don't feel like that's going to sit well for me at Western States.
I had heard that kind of old folklore that people just eat food when they do ultras. Like, I don't really think I needed it. I've had a beer during a race. That's kind of more just for fun. But at this point, I'm really just doing gels and chews.
With those real foods, I'm looking at carbohydrate numbers still. I'm looking at sodium numbers still and trying to keep in line with what I know I need to be hitting according to those numbers.
But when I'm racing, it's kind of my tried and true. It's primarily precision gels and precision hydration. When I get to aid stations, it's potatoes, cantaloupe or watermelon, and that's what's worked for me. Coca-Cola as well, occasionally as a high carb later in the race too.
I'll use chews later in a race if I want to be chewing on something. I think it's just after a while of just doing gels or drink mix, it's nice to kind of have something that feels more like real food. And that might be an hour where I'm getting more carbohydrates in because I'll just stick to my plan, but then also throw in a chew.
Every once in a while, I'll like to do Sour Patch Kid candies or applesauce. But in general, whenever I've gone for real food at aid stations because it looks good in the moment, it doesn't sit well. Like I remember I've had times where I've seen a piece of watermelon, eaten it at the aid station, run for 1 minute, and then been throwing it up. And so I really do think I'm the kind of person who works best off of gels and liquid calories. So I'm planning on sticking to that for the most part.
Then I guess do whatever works for you. If you're trying to improve your time or be more efficient and more accurate, I suppose, to know, because like if you eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, who knows what that really is? And so you're kind of guessing on, so if you want to be more accurate and working towards more efficient, then I would start to introduce more of those gels into there.
I think at the sharp end of the spear, pretty much everybody is just using sports nutrition. Every once in a while, I'll see somebody use real food, maybe in like at UTMB. Some people might have like bananas or Nutella or something, like something like that, but I don't see too many people eating regular food.
Like, that's the thing about ultra running and any endurance event, is you have to be able to adapt on the fly. You can't just be hard-headed and be like, nope, this is the only way. This is all I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna ride this until I die. No, you have to be able to adjust and figure it out and problem solve as you go.
I remember being very prepared for my first 100K, and things still went wrong. Things still happened that I wasn't anticipating. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens in my first 100.
The only thing that I've had in the past which really makes me deviate is, yeah, if you get GI issues, and I haven't had it for quite some time, but that just makes me want to like just allow the gut to settle sometimes, and whether that's holding off from taking a gel and just maybe replacing that by some fluid, or if it's more of a stitch, then maybe I'll hold off from the fluid and replace with a gel. Then at least I know I'm still getting the carbs in. And for me, if you can just like return to neutral almost and be like, okay, well, let's just get past this and then we can do it, but not hold off for too long, because then that's when the massive issues will start happening.
I won't just stop eating. I'll drop it down 10 grams to 90, or even down to 80. And that's sufficient still. Like 80 to 90 grams an hour is great. Like, most people aren't getting that in. And if you can just drop it down just a little bit, it can make a big difference on how your stomach feels. And you might be able to handle 90, but maybe you can't handle 100.
As far as stomach goes, I've been pretty lucky, knock on wood, that it didn't take too much practice to be able to tolerate it, but it's taken a lot of practice to eat that much. Like, I felt like I was always eating, which to me, for some reason, was really annoying.
Yeah, I practice this in almost all my training sessions. The short, like, shakeout runs, I won't do much. But anything over 90 minutes, I'm doing full race day nutrition, and specific to the race that I'm training for. So yes, I've trained my gut over the years to be able to handle these numbers, and I'm continually, working on that and just trying to adapt it as I go.
I do think that in general, you just can't process things that you're not used to eating frequently, especially when your blood is in other places in your body and your body is trying to do many other things besides just digest food. So training with that specific fuel that you're going to be using at the amounts that you want to be targeting, I do think is a progression that you need to work up towards. And maybe I started like 2 years ago, I think I was probably hitting closer to 50 grams of carbs an hour. And as I've been more and more conscious of it and using it more and more in my training, I can now comfortably hit 90 to 100 grams and have my stomach feel great and the same as it has previously.
Pretty much every run I do, I try to fuel very similar to how I'd be racing, because how I feel while I'm racing is like how I should be feeling while I'm training.
I think if you're a newer runner trying to up your carbohydrate intake, definitely practice it beforehand and start a little bit lower and work your way up, and see what kind of your limit is right now, and then maybe try and stretch that just a little bit. Like, I wouldn't go from hitting 60 grams an hour to trying to hit 100 grams an hour. You're probably gonna run into issues, but maybe just up that to like 70 or 80 grams an hour. Work on that for a few months. Remember, you have to be patient with nutrition. Like, you have to be patient with anything in ultra running. Like, patience is such a key thing with training, with fueling, and just making sure that you realize that it's not going to come in a week or two. It could take months, it could take half a year or even a full year for you to really get that completely down. But definitely I would say aim for those goals and try and make your way up there, because it's going to make a big difference once you get there.
I've done a lot of pre-planning before races, as far as like, here's my goal, here's what you're gonna hand me at this point. And I kind of helped, they kind of like, you came back and you had more water in here than you knew, than you were supposed to, so you're behind, so you need to catch up. So a lot of them keeping track for me, because it's hard to keep track and kind of race. So I rely on them to kind of nudge me in which direction I'm missing. or just be like, have you eaten? You need to eat something now.
Yeah, the crew is one of the most important parts of any ultra marathon, and making sure that you have a reliable crew, one that you trust, one that you know can kind of get you out of a jam if needs be. I have meetings with my crew beforehand. So we had, I think, 2 video calls in the last 2-3 weeks. We've had a group messaging system going on as well, where we've talked all about this beforehand. I've kind of informed them on what I'm going to be doing, what I'm going to need. They know my backup plan. They know all the little logistics that might come up in the race. That way, when we come out here on race day, we don't have to think about it too much. We can have a quick meeting, organize the crew, organize all the nutrition and hydration things, and then we're good to go. I think it's important to, have a plan to make sure that you're prepared beforehand and that you're practicing these things.
I think I'm pretty simple with that. I generally put what I need per each aid station in a Ziploc bag or just something like that, and then give that to whatever crew member is going to be at that aid station. And then I generally like to do like a handwritten instruction sheet just at for what I need at each one and what I might need, what my splits are going to be. So I think in the grand scheme of things, I'm pretty simple for that, but I know there's some runners that have that like super specific. But for me, it's usually like at this aid station, I need 3 90-gram gels, this many electrolyte tablets, and this much water.
If I need to make adjustments on the fly, that's where the crew comes in. I like them to have alternatives for me if what I'm using isn't working or I want to change in taste or texture, then I might ask them what else is available and switch up the plan a little bit.
So they know me, they know what the strategy is and what I'm gonna need on race day. I think the other thing that's really helped me a lot is I work closely with James at Precision Fuel and Hydration, and we actually go through the entire race beforehand. We go through every checkpoint, we go through the times that it's gonna take me from this aid station to this aid station, and we write it down on a spreadsheet of exactly what I'm going to need. So it's very detailed. I look over that, I study that, so I know exactly where I'm gonna need to fill up. I know exactly what I'm gonna be taking in. We write down the backup plan, everything. And that's been very helpful to me because it gives me a game plan going into the race. So I'm not just going into the race just trying to go with the flow. Like, I need to have a plan and I need to stick to that plan. Yeah. And Precision Fuel and Hydration has really helped me with that.
I think at Western States, the biggest responsibility the pacer has is keeping the runner wet, like having them jump in every single little piece of the river that they can, like soaking their hat, making sure their shirt's soaked. Nutrition-wise, it depends on the runner, but some runners might want to eat every 20 minutes, some maybe sooner than that, some later than that. So I think staying on that schedule and making sure they're actually eating is really important. Because it's like if you're picking up a pacer at 100K, you're already probably not feeling that good. So just making sure that they're actually eating is really important, because that's a point in the race where it's going to be really hot. You might not want to be eating that much. You might not feel that good, but it's important to just continue doing it.
But generally 2 days out, I try to carb load pretty heavily. And then the night before is just, normal carbs. But 2 days out is generally where I start to get most of my carbs and my best rest.
Yeah, so I have a pretty high carbohydrate diet as is. I'm doing pretty high volume, high mileage, and so I'm always eating high carbs. But on race week, I will maybe up that just a little bit. And I don't really worry about eating too healthy the week of the race, to be honest with you, because I just want my glycogen and my carbohydrate stores to be up.
Yeah, again, I just kind of simplify the foods that I've been eating. I'll stick with mainly white rice, lean protein like chicken, not too many vegetables, and then I'll be sipping on the Precision Carb electrolyte drink the day before the race.
I feel like it goes to junk food because it's hard to get that many carbs and calories in eating totally clean and healthy. And so it turns out to be more junk food than I would normally eat.
So it's all about maximizing recovery and maximizing carbs. So I don't change too much, but I just make sure that my dinners are pretty carb centric.
So the night before I'll have like a glass of water with a 1500 milligram electrolyte tablet in it.
Yeah, no, I like to preload the night before. I'll usually do a pouch of the 1500 milligram, and which is like 750 per half liter. And I'll usually throw one of those in my Nalgene, and I'll sip on it and finish it before bed. And then the morning of, I like to do another one of those if I can, and try to finish that maybe an hour or so before I race, so I can pee out any excess fluid, because I don't necessarily want to start overhydrated and pee clear the entire time, but I definitely want to start with the baseline strong sodium, because I know, and I've been guilty of this in the past, of drinking a ton of water in the morning of, and just being overhydrated, but my sodium levels are probably a bit diluted at that point.
Pre-race hydration, I keep pretty simple. I don't focus on it too much, but I like to make sure that I'm getting like an appropriate amount of electrolytes with the amount of water I'm drinking. So I never drink like a ton of water before, usually just like a couple water bottles. But if I'm racing, I always try to make sure that it's that right ratio of like electrolytes to the amount of water I'm drinking.
I've always done a bagel. I try to wake up early so I can finish it about 3 hours before the race starts. And that has been what I've always done. And then try to eat something right before the race starts, usually gel, it's easy.
The morning of, I like to have, again, like more carbohydrates, and then usually like sports drink, so like the high carb mix, usually like 90 grams of carbs in that. And that's definitely changed. My morning routine before a race has changed a lot. Now I'm just kind of focused on getting in a lot of carbohydrates, where in the past I kind of just ate whatever.
Before races, I like to get up at least 2 hours before. The early races are a bit difficult with that, so maybe I might push that to like 90 minutes before. Especially for like a 100-mile race, you don't need to be like super sharp right off the bat. So you can take that first, hour or two to kind of wake up, and it's okay. But yeah, I like to get in usually like some oatmeal, maybe some toast, usually like a caffeinated beverage in the morning, whatever that might be, a Red Bull or a mate or something like that. And then I just kind of, just go out with that, and it seems to be pretty good for me.
The morning of, I usually keep it pretty light. My stomach isn't very, I guess my appetite is generally low in the mornings, and my stomach is kind of sensitive to heavy meals before I run. So I like to keep it light with maybe a banana, a bowl of oatmeal, another drink with some electrolytes in it in the morning.
And then usually, like, as I'm driving to the start line, 15 minutes before, I'll take one more gel as an additional top off, just because why do it while I'm running? Why not get that going a little bit into my system right before the race?
Yeah, I usually wake up 2 hours, 20 minutes before the race. So then I'm at least preparing and having breakfast around 2 hours before the race, just so I can let that food digest and allow it to get into the system. And so when the gun goes, I'm ready to take off.
If it's a short race, like if I'm doing like a 50K or shorter, yeah, I'll take a gel, or like especially like a caffeinated gel, like maybe 15 minutes right before the start of the race, because I know I need to like get out pretty fast and I need to be kind of on my A game right off the bat. But for like a longer race, like a 100K or a 100-miler, I'm not really taking much 15 minutes before, because I don't want to be too hyped up right before the race. Like I kind of want to stay under control and be calm and keep my heart rate down.
I grew up not drinking coffee, so a lot of people criticize me. They're like, are you crazy? You don't drink coffee? How do you wake up? And I mean, I find a way to wake up. I feel like it's nice to wake up on my own power sometimes, but caffeine is undeniably a great tool for getting you through a race when you're having a hard moment. I will say, historically, I've not been super sensitive to caffeine. Like I've had Red Bulls while I'm driving and they don't wake me up. but I will have caffeine on my docket as an emergency if I am feeling low. And if it helps up here, then it helps. But I will have caffeine available to me during my race.
I do. I'm a coffee person, so I have my coffee. If I don't have time for coffee, then I've been doing a caffeine gel. That's also something I'm experimenting with, is adding caffeine kind of sprinkled out through so I can maintain the caffeine high as I go. Yeah, so that's kind of something newer that I'm adding.
I don't use caffeine in my regular life, like I don't drink coffee or anything. So I try to use caffeine sparingly, but I do use that in the middle of a race or towards the end.
And then right before I start the race, I like to take a caffeine gel. So something with like 30 grams of carbs, 100 milligrams of caffeine, and I might do that 15 minutes to 20 minutes before the start of the race. I think the right balance for me is to take about 75 to 100 milligrams of caffeine every 3 to 4 hours of racing. I feel like that maintains the energy levels throughout the race.
I really do it by feel, and it's probably not the most scientific way to do it, but the way I do it is I have that coffee in the morning, and then the last thing I have before race time is a gel 15 minutes before, and that's just a normal gel. So then the first gel I usually have, especially if it's a shorter race, I'll have a caffeinated gel about 30-40 minutes after I start, and that will be that caffeine kick I need to really get things rolling, make sure I'm in a good focused headspace to put my best foot forward.
10 to 15 hours, I'll caffeinate the entire race. I have no issue like taking caffeine for 10 to 15 hours, but I do only take caffeine every 3 hours. I'm not doing it every hour, every 2 hours, every 3 hours. That's been because I've had issues in the past over caffeinating, and also like I look at the half-life of caffeine and according to your body weight and everything else, and that seems to be about right. So I'll take in about 100 milligrams of caffeine every 3 hours during a long race. During a shorter race, it might be a little bit more, like I might do it every 2 hours. But yeah, that's kind of what I focus on with caffeine, I would say.
It's really bad because I'll go from like I can't eat, like, and then ravenous where I can't stop eating, like wake up in the middle of the night, like I gotta eat something. So yeah, it kicks in like 12, 24 hours later where I just can't stop eating, yeah.
Depends how hot the race was. Like if it's like, I did a race in Thailand where it was just incredibly humid and super hot. And I don't really think I could eat right after that until probably the next day. But a normal race where the conditions aren't too extreme, it's usually like maybe a couple hours after that I could eat normally.
I remember like I raced in China one time and like they had this amazing potato soup after the race. It was like freezing cold though. And I was like just shivering, and they gave me this potato soup and it was like the most amazing thing I've ever had.
I usually am tossing and turning in bed all night because I'm achy and my body just doesn't really know what to do. You want me to run all day or do you want me to sleep? Like, I don't know. So I get a pizza and I put it on the bedstand, and if I wake up hungry at all, I'll just take a piece of pizza, and that's my way of kind of being able to stay in bed and just resting while also able to start to feed myself back into recovery.
Usually my stomach is pretty sensitive right after the race, and all I can handle is cold water. That's the only thing that usually sounds good right after, maybe a sparkling water. But then within an hour or so, I really do like chocolate milk. If it's a training run, I can usually handle it much sooner, and I'll do something with high protein, something with some carbs in it too. I like smoothies. If I have those available to me, I'll drink one of those. But yeah, like I said, it takes a while for the appetite to come back after a longer, higher intensity thing. So I don't have really many heavier foods. I usually like to keep it pretty light after a workout or a race.
I quite like a ginger ale, followed not too long after, hopefully by a celebratory beer.
It's usually like saltier stuff that I'm gonna crave, especially in hotter races. I'll usually go for a burger and fries or something like that. Just trying to put in anything I can really after a race. I don't really care too much about it. Even for like the week after the race, it's just shoveling any type of food I can into my body. I definitely try and get higher protein in to rebuild a lot of the muscle that I broke down. But then like after a week or two, I'll start like getting back into my normal diet and trying to eat a bit healthier. But yeah, that 2 weeks after, I'm not too concerned.
Isn't beer technically a recovery drink? Just kidding. Post-race, I think it'll be trying to get a good amount of protein down, whether that's in a recovery drink or a shake. It'll probably be light foods, like a fruit, maybe some chips, something salty. But I think until I can stomach something, it'll be recovery drinks and a lot of other fluids, and then maybe a burger or a steak, something that just feels good. I know there's an In-N-Out down the street. I might have to get a shake from there. After the race, all bets are off. I can be inflammatory if I need to.